Hello and welcome to another episode of Roots and Resilience, a leadership podcast by DBNC where we have conversations about leadership. We hope that these conversations build insightful and engaging perspectives as we journey in our lives. My name is Cristian Fox, and today we are joined by a very special guest, Lilian, one of our own team members. Hi, Lilian. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing good. Today's weather is a bit gloomy, but I'm surviving.
Yeah, that's good. Just surviving.
Yeah.
Exactly. Totally understand that. Now, you're part of our EarlyON team.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I am a registered social service worker, but my role here at Dixie Bloor Neighborhood Center is a family support and outreach worker for the EarlyON team. And so essentially what that means is that I support families in any means possible. So that would look like going into our EarlyON programs and just kind of checking in with families, or through internal departments. For example, if the settlement workers has a family who has questions, they would connect them with me. And even like outside agencies, if they have trouble finding certain resources or information, then I'm like the middleman or like the contact to kind of bridge that gap. And then in terms of the outreach aspect, I go out a lot to do kind of like connecting with communities or networking with different agencies, and attending a lot of kind of, I guess to say, community events or outreach events where I would then like promote or bring awareness about EarlyON programs and services, but also as well as Dixie Bloor Neighborhood Center services and programs. And then kind of just sharing resources with the overall community and other like similar or related organizations.
Okay, yeah, that's great. That's a lot of stuff that you're doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seems like a good balance of outreach, but also working in the office.
Yes.
And I know every time I talk to someone who learns about EarlyON for the first time, they're always like, "Oh, wow, this is a service that you guys have."
Yes,
and they're always
sure.
so surprised and so relieved that, okay, I know what I can do now.
Yeah.
So
Likewise, even like when I go and promote about EarlyONs, especially to families with young children, because that's what the programs are catered to, they're always so surprised to hear that they're free programs, especially because there's like programs like childcare where you'll have to pay, or like before and after school programs where you have to pay. So when they hear about EarlyONs, they're always like amazed, and they're like, what? Like, it's free? It's funded by the government? Like, there's no catch to it? Like, this is actually free? And I'm always like, yes, and that's why they're so amazing. Like, you should come.
Yeah, that's always a great feeling.
Yeah,
when you get that kind of
100%.
response. But today, I want to talk to you about Take Back the Night and gender-based violence.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, just for anyone who's listening now, what Take Back the Night is all about?
Yeah, for sure. So Take Back the Night is a worldwide movement, but there is also a foundation that's nonprofit that was created basically to end all forms of violence. So the whole purpose of Take Back the Night is just to kind of bring awareness about gender-based violence and all violence in all forms. So that could be like sexual, physical, financial, and then just really kind of taking action to end violence in any way possible. So that could be just helping out as many like survivors as possible, or connecting with other agencies to partner with them to kind of build like an action plan towards it.
Okay, yeah, that's like a huge mission, because unfortunately it's something it's everywhere, and I feel like sometimes like we know about it, other times we don't know that it's happening to someone. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what gender-based violence is?
Yeah, so gender-based violence is basically a pattern or behavior in a relationship. It could be any relationship. It could be platonic or romantic. And it's basically used to either gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. So if I could think of some examples on the top of my head, it could look like a partner kind of belittling you or embarrassing you in front of like your friends or family, or say you want to try something new, but then they kind of tell you that like you can't, or it's like you're not going to be able to do it because of XYZ. It could be you trying to go out with your friends and then them stopping you from doing that because they don't want to, or they will in a way like manipulate you and think that you know, oh, they don't want to see you, like you'd be better off spending time here with me, kind of thing. So those are just like very like few examples or signs of like gender-based violence, but of course it does go beyond that. But I find a lot of times it can be really subtle or minimal things like that people kind of fall into that trap, and then they don't realize that those things are kind of like the first signs of being in a gender-based violence relationship. So a lot of times they'll just be like, oh no, like he just cares for me. So it's not like he, they, them, she, whoever, it's not like they mean any harm by it. But really there's a different intention behind it, which is why they do that. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's interesting that you point out, because I think a lot of times when we hear something, we hear the word violence, we think of it as being a physical thing.
Yeah.
But so gender-based violence is not just physical.
No.
Now, would that be described as emotional, or how would you describe that?
It really can be in all forms. It can be it could be, like you were saying, it could be emotional, it could be mentally, it could be physically, it could be sexually. It could be even like human trafficking is like a form of gender-based violence. It could be stalking. So even just like someone, like you telling your partner, like, I want to be left alone tonight, and they just constantly calling you or messaging you or like showing up at your house, like that is also like a form. It could even be just like harassment in general, like them saying something to you that you wouldn't think your partner would say, I guess, in a way. Or it could just be them saying like really harsh words to you, like calling you names and things like that. That could also be a form as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that it just seems like, man, there's so many different types, and like working in that field or even trying to address it must be incredibly challenging.
Mm-hmm.
From your work in that and like being on the committee, what are you finding are the most challenging aspects of it?
I think a lot of times it's really just not being able to, well, I guess in terms of like the person experiencing it or the person like helping.
Yeah, so just you as someone that's helping someone with it, what do you find are like the most challenges?
I think in that sense, it's more, I guess, helping them come to that understanding or realization that they are in a like domestic violence relationship, or they are like experiencing domestic violence. Not just domestic violence, like gender-based violence. Mm-hmm. I find that kind of helping them come to that term is really challenging, because again, a lot of times, because they're so in it, they have a lot of fears and a lot of like insecurities. So even just like admitting that they are experience gender-based violence is already a lot for them to kind of handle or take on. And just like, I guess, admitting that to themselves can also be very fearful, because they think maybe their intimate partner will find out and then something else could happen. So I find that a lot of times just kind of bringing light of that situation or that issue can be quite challenging. So it's always a lot of like conversations, but in a way where it's not like we're pushing them to kind of say, like, I'm not like, you know, a detective or cop in the room being like, tell me that you're in, like, you know, but it's just really kind of like guiding them through that, you know, hey, do you notice that you're experiencing these kind of situations? Or do you notice that your partner does say these things to you? And have you ever thought that maybe this could be like gender-based violence, or that you could be experiencing this? And then kind of having them sit with that thought and really thinking through that, wow, maybe like I am experiencing this. And if I am, like, how can I change that? What can I do? How do I get out of it? Kind of situation, I guess, to say. So that's usually what I find is the most challenging, is just having that initial process of just coming to that realization.
And do you find that by being more conversational, like, do you find that there is like a turning point? Like, does it usually work where they're like, oh, you know what, I think this is what's happening?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's really situation based. I feel that there are some who kind of realize it through the conversation, and they're kind of like, oh my God. And some may want to take action, kind of like, okay, like I am experiencing this. So like, what are things that I can do to make it so that I I'm not experiencing this anymore, or what are some things that I can do to get out of this. But a lot of times I find that they may know about it, but they don't want to voice it. So then they just kind of sit in silence with it. And so in those moments, I'm there to support, whether that's just by being there physically and sitting with them in silence, or it could just be asking them, is there anything that I can help you with right now? And then having a different conversation proceed after that.
Okay, yeah. So that's good. That when I think one thing that you said that's really powerful is giving people space and time to think about things. I think that's so helpful that you're not necessarily always talking at them, but you're letting them breathe and take in what's been discussed. But when they do come to that conclusion that I am in that situation, what are some avenues that they can take?
I think it's important to really emphasize to them that it's not their fault, because I find a lot of times when people kind of come to that realization, they start to immediately fall into a sinkhole of, oh my God, what did I do for this to happen? Or why, how did I act for him to be like this, or for them to be like this? So I think I always like to, I guess, branch off and kind of emphasize that it's not their fault and they're not responsible for any of the actions of their partner. And then just really reassuring them that there is support out here for you. There's a lot of support services now, especially, that really target towards gender-based violence and helping in that aspect. For example, if I could think of one organization on top of my head, it would be Brave. I know that they are very action-oriented when it comes to ending violence in that sense. So it would just be kind of referring them to a lot of resources and support services out there, and then as well as creating a safety action plan, because that's also really important, especially I find when a lot of people are in that state where they know that they're ready to kind of come out of this pattern or behavioral problem with their partner, that they want to take certain means to leave it, but they don't want it to be obvious so that more dangerous things will happen to them. And so creating an action plan is also a really important next step. And a safety action plan could look like just knowing who you're going to call if something were to happen, or knowing where to go when something happens. Sometimes it can be really advanced, getting a separate number so that you call certain people or certain support services with this number, and then you call him with this number. So then he doesn't, or so that they don't know that, you're talking to other people.
Right.
So it could be more intricate like that, or creating kind of a safety place for you to go to. It could also just look could be getting legal aid from somewhere, but keeping it very on the down low, so that so that your partner wouldn't find out, kind of stuff like that. So that's kind of at a glimpse what a safety action plan could look like.
Okay, yeah, that answered one of my questions. I was curious about this. I have heard that before, but I think that's quite helpful to be okay, now there's a plan in place. Now there's some things that we can do to help make sure that we can minimize the risk of that. So you're talking about safety action plans, different services that people can use, something like in Brave. But now for people that are listening or watching this and are curious about it, what can they do?
So I find that for people who are listening and maybe they themselves are not experiencing it, but maybe they know someone who's experienced it, or they later find out someone is experiencing it, I feel the most important thing to do is to really just hear them out and really listen to their story, and just be there to support them, but not in a what's the word to say, not in a very intruding way, but in a very kind of I'm here for you. If you ever need anything, just let me know. So just kind of instead of standing in front of them and being hey, what can I do for you? But instead to stand beside them and be I'm here. So just let me know what you need and I'll try my best to help. And of course, the most important thing is really to just believe them when they tell you that they are experiencing this. Because I find that's also another challenge. A lot of victims and survivors will face with is that they tell their story, and a lot of times, depending on who they tell it to, the person will just kind of be like, oh, yeah, like, sure, you say this, but maybe they don't mean it like that, or maybe they just do this because they care about you, or they're doing this because, you know, you guys are in a relationship, or you guys are, you know, very, like, intimate with each other and stuff. But so then it demeans them in their experience, right? Because it makes them feel like, okay, well, I'm reaching out to you and I'm telling you this, and then now you basically are, like, downplaying my feelings and, like, my experiences, and you know, I'm telling you that I feel like I'm in danger, but you're not believing me. So then they feel kind of like isolated and lonely, and kind of like, who can I go to then now, right? So I think for people who are listening is really, if you are listening, to get out of this is to just really, like, listen to their story and believe them, and then just try to support them in however way that they need to be supported.
Yeah, I think the idea of, like, believing them is so important, because I get the sense that, like, when there's something like physical violence, you can say, oh, my partner hit me. And that's, like, people, generally speaking, will understand that and go, okay, that's a problem. You need to get out. We need to get help. But when it's something like belittling, it's like, well, how do you, it's like, it's a lot harder for people to be like, well, I need proof of that. I don't believe you, because people do that all the time.
Right.
So I think you're right that it's just like people need to feel heard and believed to know that, okay, this person that's, like, that's saying they want to help me actually believes what I'm saying.
100%.
So I think that seems like, yeah, that's huge. And I like what you said too about not standing in front of someone, but standing beside one to say, I'm here for you. What can let me know what you need, and I will be there for you.
Exactly.
It makes a huge difference.
It does. Because then, you know, because if you do it like that, then they won't feel like you're, in a way, like, pushing them to try to, like, make a change all of a sudden. And it kind of feels like, okay, like, I know I need to do something, like, stop telling me because I know, but it's just like, I don't know how to, and I just need you to be there for me to, like, hold my hand to go through the first door kind of feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like, you touched on another thing that I find is always difficult. It's like, yes, you don't need to tell me that I need to do it. It's like, I need to know how. Because if you're in a relationship with someone and this stuff is going on, it's probably a long-term one, and it's not just easy, like, oh, I'm just going to walk out and that's that. It's like, no, there's a lot of steps that need to happen.
Exactly. And for people who do experience gender-based violence, like, there is already a very intimate history between the partners, right? A lot of times it's, you know, you, of course, like, with feelings, you fall in love with them and you care about them, but because of the way they treat you, you don't necessarily like it. And of course, sometimes it can be dangerous and it can be wrong, very wrong. But we're all humans at the end of the day, right? When we love someone and care about them, no matter what they do, sometimes we just feel like we can't leave them because of XYZ reasons. But we also need to understand that at the end of the day, our safety always comes first. And even if we want to care for them as much as we can, if we don't care for ourselves, there's nothing that we can even give to care for them.
Right. Yeah. I think that's so, like, just remembering that we're human and we have those, and it will take time, but I think you're right. Like, safety, just trying to remember your safety is the number one important thing, and to try and deal with that.
Exactly. 100%.
But yeah, it gets so difficult when you do have feelings for someone, especially if you've been with them for a long time, which it's more likely it is that situation.
Exactly.
Yeah. So incredibly difficult stuff. Now we're talking a lot about not the doom and gloom, but a lot of the challenges with working in this kind of work. But what are you finding personally is your favorite thing that you like about being on the Take Back the Night committee?
I would definitely say that just really seeing everyone come together and being unified and taking action against this issue, I think is really empowering and inspiring and just very uplifting. I feel like it's one thing to kind of, like, partake individually, like, if you donate to, like, a foundation for it, for example, versus, like, for example, when we did the Take Back the Night event here at DBNC, we did a march, and, like, that always occurs, like, every year whenever we do Take Back the Night, we do a march to kind of just promote and bring awareness. But just that feeling when you're in it and marching with a whole group of people to just, like, raise awareness about this issue is just, it's like a whole nother feeling of just feeling like, wow, like, like this is exactly like what we need to be doing. It's like taking the action and not just being like all talk and just saying like, yeah, like we're gonna do this, and then, you know, a couple months later, a couple years later, it's like you still don't really see like results, I guess, from it, or you don't really see like an action plan. And so, yeah, I just feel like that's like one of my favorite things is just doing the march and just seeing everyone coming together, and we're all like just chanting. We like Rebecca from Embrave, like she created kind of like these like chants that we could all say together, and so yeah, it was just like, I don't know, I just felt like it was so empowering. And then like having those people in the streets when they honk at you and like they're supporting you, that's like also really like big too. I find that it just feels like yeah, like people understand like this is an issue and like this needs to be stopped. So I feel like that's like one of my favorite things. And of course, like just overall, like having a community event like that and then seeing all these different organizations come together. And I think that's also really nice because a lot of times it would be like, well, for example, like Take Back the Night, the community event we had for that, there was a lot of organizations in like relation to, you know, ending violence, ending like human trafficking, things like that. So it was neat to see all these organizations kind of be in one setting when you normally don't see that because they're either placed kind of like across Ontario or like across Peel. And so just kind of like seeing all of them come together and then learning more information about each one and what they do, that is also just really inspiring because then it makes me feel like that, you know, we're all like at the end of the day, we all just have the same goal and we all want to just help people at the end of the day. And I find that sometimes it feels a little bit like isolating when it's like I'm working at this organization and I just feel like, you know, you think like, oh, DBNC, we do all these things, but then you realize like, oh, but all these other organizations are also doing this thing. And then you have like the collaboration and like the connections that you build and just like kind of what bigger projects can we do? I feel like that's also something I really like too when kind of community events like Take Back the Night form. We kind of all come together and then that's kind of like when we get to talk with everyone and it's just a very like uplifting atmosphere to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said because I find like, no, regardless of what work you're doing in an agency, like here at DBNC, we do what we do. And sometimes it's like, it's great to remember that, oh, yeah, there's all these other organizations that do it. And then like something like to Take Back the Night and meeting with everyone and seeing how everybody else, like what everyone else is doing. And the fact that we're all in this together. We may be from different agencies, we're from DBNC, we're from Embrave, but we all have the same goal.
Exactly.
And that feeling you mentioned of marching and then having someone honk at you in support, that's got to be an amazing feeling to know that, hey,
100%.
you know, this person, even though it's not every single person, but this person at least is aware that, hey, this is a problem. So it's one more person who knows that it's not just some made up thing. It's real and that we need to stop it. So that's great.
Yes. Exactly. Thank you for beautifying my words.
I love the word beautify, by the way. Appreciate that. So do you have any stories or success stories that you can share from working in the committee? Obviously nothing too personal or you know, that's obviously confidential, but do you have any like moments or things that you're just like, wow, yep, this is why I do it?
Honestly, I find that I don't know if this is very like, well, I don't really even know what the term you would call it, but I don't know. For me, I don't really have kind of like one success story. I feel like every time when I help someone, I consider that a success story. So everyone that I help, I consider it a success story. And so it's hard for me to always just like pinpoint one. So I feel like for this question in particular, I just think I want to just say that I find that every time when I do help someone, like I just think that's a success story for myself. And that's why I do the work that I do. Because every time when I come out of like either a conversation or like, I guess, like an intake or whatever you want to call it, when I come out of helping them, I get a feeling would be, if I could describe it, like a feeling of relief that, you know, now this person doesn't need to struggle anymore because I was able to kind of bring all of like my knowledge, maybe it could be privilege, it could be all the resources that I know or that I have to kind of help them take that first step up the stairs or the next couple of steps up the stairs to get to where they need to get. So I think for me personally, that everyone that I've helped, I think is a success. Yeah, I don't know if that's like philanthropist of me to say, but
no, I think that's good that you're not just so focused on like, oh, you got this one amazing story. It just means that no, you're actually like helping a lot of people. And like I think the analogy of the stairs is great. It's like you can't get them to necessarily to the top in one intake, but you can get them a little bit closer.
Exactly.
Like they can just take one step at a time and get to a point where, okay, now I have a better idea of what I have to do, and now I know how to go about and do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. And I think that's fine to like not have one specific success story, but just say that, you feel that feeling whenever you do have an intake.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
Which at the end of the day, that's all we really want is to know that, like, even though we're not going to like solve every single problem that a client has, if we know that we can make a small difference and just keep doing that, then we know we're doing the right thing. So it sounds like you're there,
100%,
which is awesome. Now, one final question that we always ask all of our guests is if you could go back in time to when you're 16 and talk to your 16-year-old self, what advice would you give your 16-year-old self?
That's a very deep question. I would say I would probably go back in time and tell myself to stop wanting to grow up so fast. Right. I feel like back then when I was 16, all I could imagine and think of was, when I turn like 25, I'm going to already have a house, I'm going to have a family, I'm going to have children, I'm going to be married. And I was like one of those children, like when I was younger, I would like dream of like my future life. Like I would like write it out and I'd have a whole plan and I'd be telling about it to everyone so excitedly. But now that I'm like here at that age, I feel like it's a lot of the things that I guess that we dream of when we're younger feels so much like a fantasy, I guess to say, because we kind of like idolize it through like TV or like media. And so now that I'm at this age, I'm realizing it's actually a lot harder to get all those things, and that because I was so excited about all that stuff and like just growing up in general and like kind of being an adult now, being independent, that I kind of like missed out on just like having fun when I was younger and not really like worrying about responsibilities and things like that and just really enjoying my youth. And so, yeah, if I was to go back, I would just tell myself like, just enjoy your time being young. Like, don't stress about growing up so fast. And like, and I guess the other one I would say is to like forgive myself for like the mistakes that I make, and forgive my parents for being too hard on me and things like that. So I think those would probably be the two things I would say to myself, my younger self.
Yeah, I love those. Like, I do find, like, man, like, as much as I'm loving adult life, now I feel like I'm doing the whole thing. I'm getting married soon.
Yes.
Doing, like, home renovation. Oh, thank you. I'm doing, like, home renovations, working a full-time job. So I'm doing all that stuff, which I'm loving. But there's something about, like, especially when I think back to high school and university, where it's just, like, there was nothing cooler than, all right, I've got these 2 classes I don't love necessarily, but then there's lunchtime. And then I get to hang out with all my friends.
Yes.
Like, that was the one time in your, like, which you'll never get to again, where you could just see your friends, all of your friends, and see them all the time, and you were forced to socialize. Like, I don't necessarily miss the, like, going home and having to worry about assignments and, like, I've got to do my homework. But there was something about being younger and being free.
Yes.
That, like, a freedom that you don't necessarily have when you're older. So 100%. I think it's one of those things we all either were like you were like fantasizing about, like, I've got all these plans that I can't wait to be older, or you're just like, you know what, this is miserable. Not nobody likes me, but like this is like one of those things I always felt as a teenager, is that like everybody kind of assumed that you were going to be this awful person because you were a teenager.
Right. And
so you wanted to get to the point, like in my case, I always felt like 30 was like the ideal age where you could still be young, but you were professional. And that's sort of true, but at the same time, it's like, man, I wish I enjoyed, just growing up and just being a kid.
Exactly.
And I think you're so right when you say that. That's like a great piece of advice, because when you're 16, all you want to do is get older.
Exactly.
But you just want to stop and like actually appreciate that time. And I think, you know what you're saying, forgiveness, I think that's a huge thing. Like forgiving yourself for those mistakes, because you are going to make mistakes as a kid. You're still going to make mistakes as an adult, but you have to forgive yourself. And then, of course, the whole thing that you're mentioning with your parents being too hard on you, it's one of those, forgive them, because it's like they, you know, nobody really knows how to parent until you're actually a parent, and even then you totally don't know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you want your kids to be successful, so of course you're going to be hard on them. But I think being able to see that, it's a long-winded way of saying I completely agree, and I love both of those answers.
No, 100%.
What I'm ultimately getting to.
Yeah, and I feel like the biggest thing that, well, when I think about it is because now that I'm older, all I can think about is just how hard work-life balance is. Yeah. And how impossible it is to, in a way, like, not impossible, I guess I should reword that, but it's a lot harder, like you were saying, to like have a social life or to have the freedom like after work, because so much of our life is centered around work and just really making a living to survive, especially in this economy. I'm not even going to go into it. That's a whole ordeal.
Oh, the economy.
That's a whole ordeal.
That's a whole ordeal for sure.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I always like the work-life balance thing is always challenging, but I think like as I get older, and I think just generally as people start like working longer and getting used to that, then you start to get better at it, but it's still always going to be a challenge.
Yeah, 100%.
But I don't know, I'm at a loss for words, because I'm still thinking about that actually. But you know what, I have to say though, this has been a great conversation, minus the economy, which is always going to be annoying. But you know, thank you for coming in, and I feel like we had a great conversation. We got to learn a lot.
Yeah.
I know this will be very helpful for our listeners and viewers who, you know, maybe aren't familiar with gender-based violence.
I hope so.
And hopefully for the youth listening, you know, maybe relax a little bit and just enjoy
your time.
Enjoy your time, because it's never going to come again.
Yeah.
Definitely enjoy that. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
We definitely want to have you back.
I'm glad to be back.
Awesome.
Yes.